Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hunt Palmer coming to you for the Mercedes-Benz at Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Monday. Means we're brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. Got Jacob back and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. We are fired up. You were here with us to begin the week. I'm fired up to be back. Appreciate everybody for filling in last week. I candidly only popped in for 15 minutes. I know Musso did a little bit of work here. I know Taylor did a little bit of work here. Appreciate everybody for picking up the slack as we headed to the coast for the week as a family. Tons of fun, but thrilled to be back and doing so on a day where, this is a busy day, and it's one where it's almost hard to get to everything. But I made the mental decision to look at this and go, there's going to be a Thursday in July where you wish you had this much stuff to talk about. So just enjoy it. So I'm going to go ahead and enjoy the next couple of hours here. Hope you do as well. NFL draft has completed. We're going to talk about that, specifically the New Orleans Saints and their selections. The biggest one, probably Tyler Shook in the second round. We'll talk about that in 15 minutes with Mark Ennis, who hosts Afternoon Drive up in Louisville, Kentucky. LSU added a defensive lineman in the transfer portal. Derek Carr is preaching about shoulder injuries, apparently. And we got to get to my thoughts on the rest of the Saints draft, some SEC baseball, and, of course, LSU takes 2 of 3 from the Vols in a big-time weekend at the Box. That's where we're going to start with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Man, what a weekend for LSU baseball. Just a wild one, and just kind of an encapsulation of what can go on over the course of 3 days. You had 2 very high-level baseball teams, some very high-level pitching, elite lineups. You had drama. You had extracurriculars in the stands. You had weather delays. You had walk-off homers, walk-off 10-run rules. It had everything in what is really and honestly becoming one of the biggest rivalries in college baseball, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't know that there's a lot of hatred between the Tennessee fans and the LSU fans the way that you would have in a football rivalry that's developed over decades. But with the way that this rivalry has gone and the stakes that they played for in a super regional in Knoxville, in Omaha a couple times, in an SEC championship game, and you've got the back-to-back national champions that are on the field, everyone knows the stakes are a little bit elevated, and you sense that on the field with the chippiness. You sense that in the stands with all that went into that, and you sense that in the play. And yes, Tennessee absolutely dictated the terms of the action for 2 games. They dictated the terms of the action for 2 games. And LSU found a way with a lot of help in the first game, and then dominated the game on Sunday. And that's all that matters, because in February and March, I am looking at how you win. What does it look like? Are you throwing strikes? Are you making the plays? Are you executing offensively what you're trying to get done? I don't care if it's 16-3 or 9-3. I want to see what it looks like. At this point of the year, I just want to see whether you won or lost, because this is all about resume building. And we're going to talk resume later in the week, but this was a big weekend for LSU. It started back on Friday, and you had the long delay. And then you put 2 left-handers on the mound that were absolutely sensational. Liam Doyle baffled LSU for 6 2/3. He only gave up 1 hit. And Cade Anderson was almost as good. Doyle was better, but Cade Anderson was almost as good. And Tennessee goes ahead in the 6th. And they nudged the lead in the 8th, and they nudged the lead again in the 9th. The key in all that was that you saw Jay Johnson go to Zach Cowan when he needed to get a couple of outs in the 8th, and Cowan got them. And you don't use Cowan and Evans very often when you're losing. And he decided to do it. And Cowan got out of the inning. Now, Myers did give up a run in the 9th, but you got some critical outs, and then the offense kicked the door in when Tennessee cracked it open. Here's a news flash. College players make a lot of errors. If you put the ball in play, there's a chance something good can happen. And Dean Curley is a mental basket case over there at third base right now. He's made 5 errors in the last 2 weeks. He DH'd on Sunday. And you hit him 2 baseballs, and he couldn't make either play. And then what was left of the box, which was extremely lubricated at that point, got into the ball game, and you had some big swings, and it boiled down right there to a freshman in Derek Curiel with what was probably the swing of the season to that point to get that tying run home with that ground ball through the right side, and then Bear Jones hit it to Tiger Stadium. And LSU was outplayed for the majority of the game on Friday. But the offense showed up when it needed to. I've got concerns about some of the at-bats against Doyle, against a really good Saturday starter in Marcus Phillips, and some of the numbers against LSU Aces. But what you cannot take away from this team, not necessarily just line up this team, is that you have now won a game that Liam Doyle started. You have won a game that Kyson Witherspoon started. You have won a game that Jared Spencer at Texas started. You have won a game that Pico Khan from Mississippi State started. You are beating aces one way or another. They're not bashing these guys all over the place. In the case of Witherspoon, they got the pitch count up and got him out of the game, and Cade Anderson was brilliant. In the case of Pico Khan, you hit 2 home runs, and Ianson struck out 15. In the case of Spencer, that was probably the best game LSU's played all year. To go into that game in Austin, game 1, Anderson was great, went to the bullpen, you knocked Spencer around, got him out of the game, and won that game convincingly on a Friday night in Austin. And there are a number of ways you can beat aces. LSU is doing that consistently. Now, Saturday, Tennessee dominated LSU, I thought. I was in the box, in the press box, and yeah, it was a 6-run 8th that was the difference in the score of 9-3. But you look at LSU got out hit 10-4. Tennessee left 12 men on base in the game. They were constantly putting guys on, and they just didn't cash in until the very end. And you can credit LSU's pitching for holding on as long as they could before the dam broke. But the fact of the matter is that if you just look, I mean, that's a football game where the time of possession is 42-18, where one team ran a kickoff back, and that's the only offense they have, and the other team's consistently driving down, and their kicker has missed 3 field goals. Like, the terms were dictated by Tennessee in that game, and they very much deserved to win it. My one critique in that game that I saw, I need Jared Jones, a junior at first base, to not play that hot shot ground ball off to the side and olay it when it gets into right field for those 2 runs to come around. You were still within striking distance at that point, and the ball was hit pretty hard, and it was scored a hit, and I don't really care about that. But Jones has got to get down on all fours at 6'4", 250, and take that one off the chest. I mean, it's easy for the overweight guy who hadn't played a game of baseball or done anything physical in decades to say, hey, man, get in front of the 100-mile-an-hour ground ball. I understand the irony that comes with that. But I'm here to analyze the game. I'm looking at Jared Jones needs to get in front of the baseball instead of trying to pick it off to the side. Jay Johnson said the same thing in the postgame. That, I think, is my one complaint there, but I don't know that LSU climbs back into that one anyway. Phillips was incredible. He was throwing 100 miles an hour, wasn't walking anybody, and he did finish with 4 walks. A couple were late, but he just looked really, really good. But what Jay Johnson did, and this is going to be a talking point the rest of the season, something I wrote about over on Around the Horn at LouisianaSports.net. After Ianson came out with 2 outs in the 6th inning, he went to Schmidt, went to Rizzi, went to Primo, went to Shores, went to Williams, went to Fontenot. Never put Evans or Cowan into the game because there's another game to play. And you just can't risk those guys going out there and not having them for the next day and it compromising you in 2 games. One, you lose because you're already behind, and the next you lose because you don't have them. That's going to be the dilemma for Jay Johnson in every game moving forward because you have to know when to deploy those guys. They're weapons for this team, and you've got to use them in wins, and LSU is using them in wins. I pulled this stat for Around the Horn today. LSU is 15-1 when Zach Cowan pitches. They're 11-2 when Kason Evans pitches. There's 3 losses there. They lost the games that Auburn played because they never led at Auburn. And then they lost a game in the Texas series in game 3, and Evans came in. They were down 5-0. So you got to know when to deploy those guys. They'll get it done. When those guys come in with a lead, LSU's undefeated. You couldn't go to those guys down because you got to have them for the next day. And they had them for the next day. And finally, the LSU bats broke through. And on Sunday, it was an onslaught from really the start. Curiel hits the big home run that kind of seized momentum back for LSU. Tennessee had it from game 2, and they scored 2 in the first inning of game 3. Curiel hits the homer. You get the 4 spot in the second, and then you're off and running. And I'll say this. LSU's offense entering Sunday for really a month had not been good enough on the whole. And some of that is LSU needs to swing the bat better. Stephen Milam was hitting 200 in league play. Jared Jones had 1 home run in league play. You've got to be better than that. Yes, 100%. That's where you lead with the offense. There's another element to this. Some of these SEC pitchers are freaking good. They're really, really, really good. And you've got to find a way to either drive their pitch count and get them out of there or make them work and get a big hit. It's hard to do. I'm not 100% comfortable with the entirety of the body of the work, but I understand how difficult it is to hit some of the guys they're facing, to hit Kyson Witherspoon, to hit Marcus Phillips, to hit Liam Doyle. I mean, these guys are throwing 98 to 100. They have good command. They have plus secondary stuff. I'm not asking for you to score 7 or 8 in those games, but LSU didn't have a hit in the first 5 innings of either of those games, Friday and Saturday. But the offense finally broke through, and I think when you see run-of-the-mill pitching, average pitching, which you're going to see in a regional, which you'll probably see some in the super, I think LSU's offense is probably better than the numbers that they've put up. But then if you get to Omaha and you see Doyle again, you see some of these elite-level arms, like you're going to have to hit those guys eventually. But the bottom line is you won 2 of 3. You beat one of the best teams in the country. That was one thing missing from LSU's resume. Yes, it's great if you swept Oklahoma. Yeah, it's great. You swept Mississippi State. Awesome. Missouri came to town. You got lucky there. They're terrible. But you'd gone to Austin and only won 1. Auburn's got a top 5 RPI. You got swept. So you don't play Georgia this year. So that's not an opportunity to get that done. Like, you hadn't taken down one of the heavyweights in the league. Arkansas is to come. Their RPI is excellent, even though they lost 3 series in a row. But Tennessee is a great team. And you have that now on your resume that you've beaten a great team. Thought it was a gritty, gutty effort from LSU. You can't leave out the fact that Tennessee's third baseman made 2 errors on Friday that ultimately helped cost them the game. But LSU kicked that door in when they had one open, and then on Sunday, they were much the better team. Huge, huge weekend for LSU. You're in great, great position with 3 weeks to go in the regular season. And this is the biggest game of the year was on Sunday, and I think LSU may have played their best game of the year in that game. It's either that one or the first game in Austin. Phenomenal, phenomenal stuff from LSU over the weekend. We'll talk more about it as we move forward in the show today. Our Monday show is brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs. Gulf Coast Office Products. Find them online at gcopnet.com. All right, the Saints took 2 players from Louisville over the weekend in the draft. One, Quincy Riley, a cornerback. The other might be their quarterback of the future in Tyler Shook. One guy that's watched Tyler Shook over the last few seasons up in the Bluegrass State is Mark Ennis. He hosts Afternoon Drive up in Louisville. We'll talk to him coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com. Jonathan Carr and his team, just phenomenal people to work with on the insurance side of things. Look, hurricane season is getting closer. We're at the end of spring here. It's 95 degrees. Summer's around the corner. We know what comes. Make sure your property insurance is in the right spot right now. If you don't know what your hurricane, wind, and hail deductible is, you need to know that. If you don't know what your building valuations are and what your limits are on that policy, you don't know what a co-insurance penalty might be, Jonathan Carver and his team at the Highland Insurance Group can make sure your insurance is placed properly. Maybe you're a business that's got multiple locations. Can you spread that risk out? Maybe you're closer to the coast than right here in Baton Rouge. Do you have the proper carrier? Jonathan Carver and his team at the Highland Insurance Group can help you with that. Give them a call or go online to HighlandIG.com. They're right here in Baton Rouge. They can help you statewide. It's the Highland Insurance Group online at HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Back here, Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. NFL Draft wrapped up over the weekend, and some sort of miracle, the New Orleans Saints managed to take all 9 of their draft selections instead of packaging 5 of them to move up 3 spots for a defensive lineman that doesn't pan out. So that's a good start. They got things moving with Kelvin Banks in the first round, and then might have taken their quarterback of the future in the second round. Louisville's Tyler Shook was a selection, 40th overall. Head up to Louisville. Mark Ennis with 939, the Ville up there in the Bluegrass. Good enough to give us a little bit of time here on this Monday. Mark, we appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on here.
It is our pleasure. Let's talk about Tyler Shook. I know he wasn't in Louisville for a long time, but he was there for a productive time. So he comes over in the transfer portal. Was it immediately known that he was going to be the starting quarterback?
Yeah, he was identified like that was the guy that Jeff wanted. And I would say that he equally wanted to come to Louisville to play for Jeff for the last year that he had. And I'll say, I've done this for a while. One of the few times I've ever had a transfer that announced he was coming to Louisville, and people at Texas Tech or like the school where he was leaving, like reached out to him like, "You're going to love this kid," like proactively. Very liked where he was. They were sad to see him go, but it was very intentional what he hoped to get done here in Louisville. Wanted to kind of be the finishing school for him. He had one more year. He wanted to show he could stay healthy. He wanted to lead an offense that's very much has a reputation as getting guys ready for the pros, and I think it worked out for him really well.
Tell us about his game. Obviously, injuries are one thing that off the field, but on the field, what did it look like?
Yeah, he's a very level-headed guy. He is a very accurate thrower. And this is not super exciting, but I will say in terms of keeping a team and an offense like on the field, all of the little things, the checkdowns, the right decision, not taking a sack, throwing it away, the dump down, the fourth option is the only guy that's open. It's on the money every time. But don't let anybody fool you. Also, will rip it. Like, he really does have a strong arm. Decisive decision maker, and doesn't really lock on to anybody. He really would work across the field all year, and he had receivers and tight ends to work with, and was a very, very good decision maker. I think he ended up being even better than everyone was really hoping for.
Look at a quarterback 6'5", 225. There aren't a lot of those that are really good athletes. I mean, Josh Allen comes to mind. He's a freak of nature in the NFL. Yeah. But I heard a number of commentators and analysts talk about Shook's athleticism. What did you see?
Yeah, we didn't, but for good reason. And I'm being mildly sarcastic in saying that. But obviously, Tyler, the whole reason that we're talking about a 25, 26-year-old guy is because he's had an injury history. He's broken his clavicle twice, broke his leg once. And part of like their design for him this year was, I know you can run, but we're not doing any designed runs for you at all. And you could see this year when he broke the pocket, he was not trying to do anything close to running except for when absolutely called upon. But he's a very athletic guy. When the pocket broke down in the Clemson game, he somersaults into the end zone for a touchdown. He can move. They just, I think, were very conservative with him this year. And I think, obviously, in the NFL, I doubt that Kellen Moore is going to be, drawing up a bunch of designed runs for him. But in terms of escaping pressure, but keeping good form and being able to throw on the run, that sort of thing, a very athletic guy.
Talking with Mark Ennis, host Afternoon Drive up in Louisville. Saints added a couple of Louisville Cardinals to their roster over the weekend, Tyler Shook being the one we're talking about right now. How quickly for you, watching him on the field, did you look at him and go, okay, that's an NFL quarterback?
I would say very, very early on. They played Georgia Tech in the third game of the season. And that game, he really played extremely, extremely well. A couple of throws, kind of flat-footed throws that were just absolutely on the money. And then the following week at Notre Dame, I thought he really was just outstanding in the Notre Dame game. And they nearly pulled off that win against Notre Dame. But he had a touchdown pass in the Notre Dame game in particular to Ja'Cory Brooks, kind of very off balance. I'm sure you've seen it by now. But he started to make those kinds of throws relatively routinely from then forward. And that's when you started to realize, like, man, they really got something here for sure.
Yeah, when I looked at the stat sheet from this season, I knew how good Notre Dame's defense was when I saw 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, that's pretty salty there on the road in South Bend. So that certainly stood out. And that sounds like you saw the same thing. Is there anything that you looked at in his game and said that's going to have to get better?
There isn't. I would not say that there's an absolutely glaring weakness. I think what you're worried about with him is just the injury history and him playing conservatively because of it. And again, it's, to be clear, these are not lingering issues. He's had terrible luck. Your collarbone twice and your leg. But he came in January. He absolutely had command of the offense by the end of spring, and there was never hesitation that he was going to be the guy head and shoulders above everybody else. And then was fantastic this year. He's excellent this year. I think just confidence, consistency, that sort of thing. He's going to be just fine. And I think, look, you don't draft a guy his age, I think, to sort of bring him along slow. I think you got to be thinking, hey, if we need to call him this guy right away, I think he'll be ready to go.
It's curious to see what the Saints will do at the quarterback spot. Of course, Derek Carr is a huge question mark at this point. That's a whole different story. One more here for you, Mark. We appreciate a little bit of time here on this Monday. Quincy Riley, fourth-rounder cornerback out of Louisville as well. What can you tell us about him?
He is I think you guys will love him. He is just a very aggressive chance taker. I know a lot of New Orleans, Lattimore fans there. Like this, he will go for the ball. He will get you the ball back. He might give up some here and there, but I think on balance, he's worth it. But just tremendous ability to catch the ball, which isn't always there, for defensive backs. That's the reason that they're over there. But he will intercept the ball. Played just phenomenal against some of the best teams and the best quarterbacks that Louisville faced over the years, and is just a real ball hawk. I'll be kind of interested to see where they use him, how they use him, because I think he's pretty versatile for a guy his size. But just a real ball hawk, a real aggressive ball hawk. I think you're gonna like it.
Saints have a lot of holes in the secondary at this point. It was a strength with Lattimore gone, Paulson and Debo gone. They've got some holes to fill, so we'll see if Quincy Riley can find his way in the New Orleans defense. Mark, I know you got a show to get to this afternoon, so we really appreciate some time. Thanks.
Anytime.
He is Mark Ennis up there in Louisville, 939 The Ville and ESPN station, so we appreciate a little bit of time. I'm going to talk about Tyler Shough tomorrow. There's just too much to do today, and I want to talk about the other picks, and I wanted to dedicate a segment totally to him from my perspective. But just as a little bit of tease to what we'll do tomorrow on the show to talk about him, he is not a guy that was really on my radar until very late in this process. We heard so much about some of the other quarterbacks. There was so much Jackson Dart buzz. There was so much Shedeur Sanders buzz at one point. You heard about some other guys like Kyle McCord potentially as a flyer late. And we didn't really talk about Tyler Shough. And then I started to do a little bit of research after the pick was made, and being like, well, this makes some sense. So I'll talk about it on tomorrow's show, but I wanted to get a firsthand account of it from up there in Louisville, and that was a glowing account. You wouldn't expect a lot different from that. He had a really good year at Louisville. I did a number of hits, I think 3 in Washington last year after Jaden Daniels was selected. And I certainly didn't have anything negative to say about Jaden last year. I don't know that we can expect that Tyler Shough ends up exactly like Jaden Daniels coming up, but you go back to the college roots where a guy had a lot of success, you're going to hear some glowing terms. That's a quarterback-friendly offense that Brom is running there at Louisville, but Shough did a good job of piloting it. They went 8-4 this year. He threw for over 3,000 yards and 23 scores and has dealt with some injury. But look, this is something that I think a lot of Saints fans have clung to. The last quarterback that showed up with some shoulder issues in New Orleans that were in the rearview mirror did okay for a run there. So we'll see what's next in store for Tyler Shough and whether or not he will be the opening day starter for the New Orleans Saints. Appreciate Mark Ennis for a little bit of time here on this Monday. All right, let's shift things back to LSU. Tigers picked up a transfer portal edition. Brian Kelly said, we're not really aggressively shopping, but they went and found one. We'll tell you about it coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Monday shows brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. All your printing, scanning, copying needs. Contact our guy Trey Beal and the folks at Gulf Coast Office Products. Wherever you are in the state of Louisiana, they can help you out. And no matter what it is that you do, whatever vertical market that you're in, they've got clients that do the same thing, and they understand your needs. When I get Trey talking about equipment in the office, printers, scanners, copiers, and whatnot, He's talking about things I didn't even know existed. Now, I'm not in charge of stocking that stuff over here, guarantee, so that's a good thing. But the guy knows what he's talking about. And if you're running an office, have an office, and want to make sure that you are running it as efficiently as you possibly can, it's a dollars and cents thing. Gulf Coast Office Products can absolutely help you out with all of that. Copiers, printers, scanners, Gulf Coast Office Products. Check them out, gcopnet.com. All right, LSU announced a addition in the spring portal window. If you remember, Brian Kelly said after spring practice, I don't think we're going to be shopping actively in the transfer portal, but if something comes available, we'll look into that. So it wasn't a concerted effort from LSU, but they did have room on the roster. Dylan Battle moved on into the transfer portal after just one spring at LSU. That's the defensive lineman that Bo Davis identified, wanted to bring in. They did. Bo Davis left right before spring practice. Battle goes through one spring. He's moving on. But you had a spot, and they decided to take a player, and Bernard Gooden is that player. Defensive lineman, a native of Montgomery, Alabama, was at South Florida for the last 2 seasons initially, played at Wake Forest for a couple of years. You're talking about a kind of a lean defensive tackle at just over 300 pounds, not one of these big 330-pound, roadblocks in the middle. He's got some positional versatility. If you look at the tape from Gooden at South Florida, he plays a lot at defensive tackle. He plays sometimes out on the edge at defensive end in some situations where they're getting after the passer a little bit. So he was statistically very strong as a junior last year. He played in 13 games, had 11 starts, 35 tackles, and here's the number that really stands out: 10 tackles for loss at South Florida with a sack and a half. Kyle Williams actively wants his defensive tackles to get up the field. There are coaches defensively that want their defensive tackles to hold the point of attack, to make sure that they're not giving any ground, and to let those linebackers behind them go play. And Kyle Williams, I'm certain, understands, and I'm not trying to show you that I know more about defensive tackle play than Kyle Williams. Sometimes I talk and I'm like, does that sound wrong? What I'm telling you is Kyle Williams understands that that's an important part of defensive tackle, but I know for a fact Kyle Williams wants his defensive tackles getting vertical and getting into the backfield and making plays. He doesn't want them to be a passive part of the defense. He wants them to be an aggressive and playmaking part of the defense. And I think that's the potential that you add in Gooden. You don't ever know if things are going to translate. LSU has taken 2 FCS corners in the last 4 years. One could really play, one was overmatched. LSU has taken corners from the Big 12 and the ACC. The one from the Big 12 could really play. The one from the ACC could not. LSU has taken offensive linemen from different levels. And you look at Miles Frazier coming over from FIU. He can handle himself. You've seen linemen come in that can't. So I don't know how much this translates from USF to LSU. Not certain on that. But it's worth a look because really you're adding him as a depth piece. LSU's pretty good from a bodies perspective at defensive tackle. Jacobian Guillory's coming back for his 6th year. He is a placeholder. He is a guy that sets the point of attack. He is a guy that absorbs space. Ahmad Bro is more of a guy that is smaller and can be quicker and maybe make some plays in the backfield as he matures in his 2nd year. Dominic McKinley, ideally, in terms of his ceiling, can do both. He's 6'5", he's 305 pounds, up to 310 pounds, and he can set the point of attack. He can also get up the field. Sydir Mitchell is just a load. He's another one that's like Jacobian Guillory. And that's 4 guys right there that you feel like can play, and then you add Sean Washington to the mix as well, and then you've got 3 freshmen in Zion Williams, Brandon Brown, and Walter Mathis, and you add Gooden in. So altogether, that group that you expect to field on August 1st, Guillory, Bro, McKinley, Mitchell, Washington, that's 5 that return, 3 freshmen, Williams, Brown, and Mathis, and then you add Gooden. That's 9 guys basically at defensive tackle. You can shuffle them around. Gio Paez could play both. Gooden can probably play both. I'm not trying to pigeonhole these guys to, hey, you can only line up at tackle. But as for guys that can play tackle, that's 9. That's enough. So do you have the right mix? Do you have enough variation in skill set to be an effective defensive front? I think the answer is yes. I pretty much know what Jacobian Guillory is. Jacobian Guillory is big, physical, strong, hard to move. That's not going to change. I thought he had a great fall last year before the Achilles injury. How well he looks moving on from an Achilles injury at 330 pounds, that remains to be seen. But if he's healthy, I know what he is. I feel like you've got a pretty good chance that either Bro or McKinley is an above average SEC player. It's possible both are. It's possible neither is. But I feel like you've got a pretty good chance that one of those guys can really play. And then there was a lot of buzz about Sydir Mitchell in the spring. That's all spring practice stuff. And as y'all have heard me talk a million times about, this is optimism season, baby. Everybody looks good in the spring. Everybody's in great shape in the summer. Everybody's doing the best they've ever done in the fall. And then you go out there and the first time you lose, you got to fire everybody. But this is optimism season. And there's a lot of buzz about Sydir Mitchell. So he's a big physical dude. And then you take Gooden in the hopes that you've got an older guy that's played a lot of snaps, that's got some quickness, and can be a complement to Bro. So if you look at the different versatility levels, like Guillory and Mitchell, big, physical, point of attack, strong, hard to move. Bro and Gooden, leaner, quicker, can make some plays in the backfield. McKinley, hopefully a superstar. We'll see. That's the kind of what's been put in his lap as a 5-star number 1 player in the state. Sack at the end of the season against Oklahoma, all that. Then Sean Washington, I think, is a depth piece. But he's old, and he's big, and he's strong. So to me, this is a more functional group. I've contended this forever, really. LSU's best teams have elite defensive line play. Elite defensive line play. You go back to the championship team of 2003, Lavallee, Spears, Hill, Williams. Like that's elite stuff. You look at 7 with Dorsey. That's the best player on defense in the country. You even look at 11 with Brockers and Logan and Montgomery and Mingo, and like Josh Downs is a good player on that team, but like the front guys, Brocker and Logan, those are NFL dudes in the middle of the interior line. And then you even look at 19. It didn't work out in the pros, but turn that tape on in 2019 and see what Tyler Shelvin was doing to people. He was wrecking dudes. And I don't think LSU has played to that level in years past. I thought Mekhi Wingo had a nice year. And you can look at some individual guys and go, okay, that was pretty good, but it's not elite. And I don't know if this is elite. There's some ceiling there with the younger guys, and if one of the or two of those guys kind of pops, then maybe you've got it. But you've got to work towards that. And I'm never, ever, ever going to fault the program for taking on a big guy that can move. And I know for sure that when you look at Bernard Gooden, he's big and he can move. The tape abundantly shows that. Whether or not he can move as well when Clemson's center hits him in the shoulder pads remains to be seen. Whether he moves as well when you got to go to Oxford remains to be seen. But he can move, and he's big. So I think this is a quality ad. They weren't aggressively looking for anything. This is not an emergency plug-and-play. If Bernard Gooden gets here and it just doesn't quite work out, you've still got 8 other guys that I've listed and 4 guys that you've seen play. So I think this is good news. I don't think it's program altering, but you've got a scholarship available. Beats dressing out a walk-on and giving him some cash, as great a story as that could be. Bring somebody in that might be able to help. And I think there's a chance Bernard Gooden could. I'm not here to be the guy who breaks down a ton of tape and gives you a projected stat line for every, y'all know my role here. But I can speak to the functionality of a roster and what history tells us about LSU's program. And they've got to continue to work on that defensive line. Kyle Williams has got his chance to get his hands on this. He obviously vouched for this guy. I understand why, because the stat line that I see from USF mirrors what he wants his guys to be at LSU. So we'll see if that works out. Bernard Gooden joins the mix at LSU on the defensive line. All right, if you're looking for LSU football content, you can always find it at Hunt on LSU. Search wherever you find your podcast. Certainly search on YouTube. You subscribe up to that channel. We certainly appreciate it. It makes life easy. It's all football all year round. If you're looking for LSU football right here in the end of April, when there's not a lot of LSU football, you can find it daily over there at Hunt on LSU. We got to close out the hour. Derek Carr was saying a sermon. It just didn't sound like a sermon. We'll talk about that when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products.
Monday show is brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. Wrapping up hour number 1 here. It's been a fast-moving hour number 1. I knew that it would be, and it's probably going to be a very fast-moving hour number 2 as well. Still got some LSU-Tennessee baseball that I want to discuss. Still want to talk about the other Saints draft picks besides the quarterback that the Saints took in the second round. So lots and lots to do in hour number 2. Speaking of Saints and quarterbacks, this drama with Derek Carr, I guess that's probably the right word for it. It's going on outside the field of play, and it's involving a lot of different characters, whether it's Mickey Loomis or Kellen Moore or Diana Rossini or Derek Carr himself or whatever the case may be. There's just a lot of stuff being said in the national spotlight as the Saints get prepared to play another season and don't certainly know, at least on the outside, who their quarterback is going to be. And Derek Carr spoke, I believe over the weekend, as best I can tell, at a church in Las Vegas called The Church. Derek Carr is very much a man of faith, spends a lot of time with faith-based organizations, and was speaking to this one over the weekend and decided to kind of talk a little bit about his time in the spotlight here and what's going on in his NFL offseason while delivering a message. This is what it sounded like. It's a little bit longer than we usually play, but we'll play the whole thing.
Yes, I have to say this. I hate that I have to say this, but I have to say this. Yes, I have a shoulder injury, despite what ESPN says, and what some lady on a podcast might think. Okay, I have an MRI report to prove it. The team knows about it. We've been in constant communication. There's nothing wrong. We're figuring it out, and we're going to go forward with that. Is that okay? And I've been dealing with this, and I've been dealing with people lying about me. I've been dealing with them saying this and that, and I'm like, Lord, why do I have to continue to deal with this nonsense? Like, what is going on? And I say that to preface with, you never know what someone's really going through. And so why do we continually try to attack people? And I would say attack people that are trying to do things maybe the right way. Why do we continually try? Why do we always have to have an opinion? Why do we always? Twitter and Instagram has ruined things for some people. Because now all these people think that they have voices that have to be heard. And so like, some people's voices don't need to be heard right now. I just got to be honest with you. Because not one of our opinions in here matters. Did you know that? The only opinion that matters is that text right there. It is the Word of God. And everything must bow at that. And so
okay, so this is it's an interesting thing to me because, like, should we be talking about what Derek Carr says in a worship service? Maybe not. Like, I get that. But I also see the other side of it, so it's like everything that professional athletes do is in the spotlight. So I think he is fully aware that whatever he says, as he's basically preaching to these people, is to be disseminated. And it's just bad PR to sit up there and rip everybody while you're preaching. These guys live under a microscope. I get that. But there's not a lot of transparency on the outside. And that's going to generate intrigue and people digging for it. And Derek Carr, just at every turn, seems to say the wrong thing at this point, seems to do the wrong thing. I have given him the benefit of the doubt for a couple of years now, and I stopped doing that a couple of weeks ago when the report came out and everybody started kind of giving it a green light from around the league. And it just feels like he's not handling the situation well at all. And because of that, and because of the new group that has come in, and because of a new draft pick, like, there's just too much that's too toxic right now for the Derek Carr Saints relationship to continue. And it just felt weird to me personally for him to kind of vent about that in some sort of worship service. It just didn't seem like the time and the place. And speaking of like Twitter and Instagram, and certainly I am under no guise that like he has to do anything. He doesn't have to do anything. But you can clear the air pretty quick with said Twitter, said Instagram. Like, it's easy for Diana Rossini to come on and be like, well, he doesn't really have a shoulder injury. and Derek Carr to just come right on out with Twitter or Instagram or a press conference or press release, whatever he wants to say, and be like, yep, I'm hurt. Here's the deal. And lay out when he got hurt. Like, you can clear that up and just call her a liar immediately if you want to. That option's available. He hasn't done that. He did it behind closed doors in a worship service. But, like, he's not squelching on the outside. And it's just the only word, as this stuff continues to happen, there's actually basically one word. It's just toxic. The whole thing is toxic. And there are going to be people on the Saints beat that cover it a little bit more passionately than I do. I'm just kind of sitting back here on the 16th row going, really? That's kind of odd. Huh? What'd you say? She said, I can't think of another organization that's quite in this position right now. And it just feels like everybody needs to turn the page. It just feels like everybody needs to turn the page. Now, that can be easier said than done. There are obviously massive financial ramifications to that. There could be an injury that is a massive hurdle in that way. And then you've got to deal with whatever could potentially come in return if somebody else wants to come to you and get him. So it's not as easy as just like, all right, it's over, just deal with it. Like, you gotta deal with some circumstances. But I just feel like Derek Carr's PR is not great. And the delivery, quite frankly, to that, especially if you have the video where he starts bashing Diana Rossini, some person on the internet, and some people's opinions don't need to be heard. And it's like, well, it's an NFL podcast, and it is what it is. It's not like she's just some fan on the internet that's going nuts. She's not. She's a very, very well-respected and credentialed member of the media whose job it is to have conversations. She doesn't just run with everything she hears. This is something that she's clearly vetted, clearly felt good about reporting, and went on the podcast and said it. So it could come out that Derek Carr is absolutely hurt, has done everything right with the Saints, and the Saints understand the situation fully and are moving on accordingly. That could be the case. And if we learn that is the case, which I don't know that we will, but if we ever do, I'll walk the stuff back and be like, yeah, okay. I mean, that all makes sense. But it feels like, in taking all of these dots and connecting them, that like this can't go on, and there's something more to this story. When a quarterback that's making that much money for an NFL team is going to be out for the year, that's not something that usually just lingers for a while. That's something that is done. There's not a lot of misinformation about season-ending injuries. That's not something that just floats off and no one really pays attention to. It's reported, it's done, move on. And that hasn't happened. That leaves the door open. And if that's the case, and there actually isn't a significant injury, and this is about leverage to get out of town in this relationship, then it's just completely petty and, quite frankly, like the opposite of what you should be preaching about. But again, I'm just a guy sitting on the sideline. I don't know all the details of this, so I'm not going to bang on the table, and I'm not going to yell and scream, and I'm not going to speak definitively. I'll just tell you it feels like there's fishy stuff going on, and it certainly feels like the end of the Derek Carr era is upon us. Tyler Shook, second-round pick, that feels like the direction the Saints are going to head. So if you're looking for Saints content, you can always find it. Hunt on Saints on YouTube, Hunt on Saints wherever you find your podcasts. Saints all year round, certainly a lot going on, and we've got a ton of coverage over on LouisianaSports.net. Ross Jackson has been all over everything from a Saints perspective. If you missed any of hour number one, catch it on demand. Talk to LSU baseball at the top of the show. Mark Ennis from up there in Louisville, Afternoon Drive host, Talk Tyler Shook with us, as well as Quincy Riley. Talk to LSU football with Bernard Gooden's edition, and we got a lot to do in the second hour. We got LSU baseball to talk about, my thoughts on the rest of the Saints draft. SEC baseball standings are taking violent shifts. We'll talk about all that in hour number two. Hope your work week's off to a good start. We're brought to you by Gulf Coast Office Products. We'll pause for Sports Center and come back with the second hour of this Monday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is that website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. We got to have a tub in the Palmer house. We now got double bath duties. Got the 7-week-old's got to get his. I believe 8:30 is the time for that one. Got the kiddo that's 3.5. His has got to be done at about 6:30. We use the bathtub. You may not use the bathtub in your house. If you don't use the bathtub, it's old and dingy. It's taking up a bunch of space. You don't like taking baths. You'd like a brand new shower. They can do it for you, and they can handle every single step of that project. As David Duvall and his team put that walk-in shower in, changes and transforms the look of your bathroom and the functionality of that bathroom. It can be done very affordably. It can be done very quickly. They got financing available as well. Look, up to 18 months, 0% if you qualify. It's One Bath and Closets. You can find them online at onebathandclosets.com. David Duvall and One Bath and Closets, onebathandclosets.com.